I'm going to try doing this with like 3 devices, so we're going to see how it works. Yeah, welcome. My name is Lauren Oldja, and you are here for the aptly titled NumFOCUS Champions Circle presents How to Make Friends and Generate Impact Through Open Source Communities. My name is Lauren Oldja. In my day job, I'm a principal data scientist at Bonterra. Thank you for saying. I actually work primarily on our political and nonprofit fundraising business lines. And I'm also a frequent NumFOCUS supporter and frequent volunteer. And today, I am addressing you in my capacity as the inaugural chair of the NumFOCUS Champions Circle, which is a volunteer-led NumFOCUS committee focused on generating leads and informing fundraising strategy. So, like, as an aside, just because I'm nervous, so I want to share something personal. So, you've heard a couple of times this is my 3rd time chairing. Hopefully, maybe last. We'll see. The first time I chaired was in 2018, and I was 5 months pregnant. And then in 2019, I had an infant at home. And so because this is the end of spooky season, because we had Halloween's over and election days in the past, and now we're in the season of gratitude, I'm just so thankful to be here right now and not just completely sleep deprived or unable to walk across the conference floor. So I want to thank you all for choosing to enter in this session with based on kind of an ambitious title, but also an ambiguous one, right? And maybe just a desire to help strengthen the open source community that we have. So let's take this journey together. So I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about the work of building open source communities and how that work has changed, and the ecosystem of volunteer and paid efforts that make our open source community possible. So I think this is an important time to have this kind of chat. Because we can go back to first principles of why are we here and what do we hope to achieve? We've been on hiatus for two years from in-person events, but as you saw today, when everyone raised their hands during opening notes, right, that said most of the room were brand newcomers, right? The community has still continued to grow during this time. So I'm excited to see familiar faces here, but I'm even more excited to see all the new folks and how much pent-up energy there is for building community. So this talk is intended to be very beginner-friendly, but I hope everyone in this room will benefit. And really what I want you to take away from this talk is how you can help the NumFOCUS community, why it's so important to do so, and for you also to feel very confident in your background knowledge of how everything fits together so that you can be confident in your quest to make friends and generate impact while building a welcoming, sustainable open source community. So what is NumFOCUS, right? A little bit of background first. So you heard in this morning in the opening notes that NumFOCUS is this 501c3 nonprofit, global nonprofit, that's the sponsor of PyData NYC conference meetup and all PyData events globally. So NumFOCUS is the organization and PyData is the brand, and we can kind of There's nearly 100 projects in total between the sponsored and affiliate projects, so here's just a scroll of them. PyData is the brand used for educational outreach programs of NumFOCUS. And as an organization, NumFOCUS is the fiscal sponsor for your favorite open source scientific computing projects in R, Python, and Julia, such as NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, PyMC, Jupyter, the Julia language, ROpenSci, many, many others, right? Their logos are scrolling here. There's also a wider ecosystem of projects that are not NumFOCUS sponsored, but they're affiliated. They're often smaller in size or scope. They may be newer, but they're still part of this community. They're listed on numfocus.org as affiliated projects. So I hope you'll get a chance during this conference to hear from and interact with many of the folks who contribute to and maintain both sponsored and affiliated projects here at the conference. Now, that just scrolled some more. Okay, something's a little wrong with the slide. That's okay, I'll fix it later. Now, what does this mean? The projects are run independently of NumFOCUS, and NumFOCUS neither maintains code bases nor sets project roadmaps for future development. But affiliated projects have some marketing, funding, and community benefits from NumFOCUS, such as access to publishing their news in the newsletter, the ability to apply for and receive small grants. I think I have that here. Nope. small grants, right, from NumFOCUS, the small development grants, and sponsored projects have even more connection to NumFOCUS, right? So affiliated kind of the entry onboarding, sponsored projects have full benefits. So they have legal, financial, and governance support from NumFOCUS. And for sponsored projects, NumFOCUS provides the legal infrastructure necessary to, for example, award and receive grants or hire paid developers and developer advocates. We even have a developer advocate on staff at NumFOCUS now. So, sponsored projects also are.
Oh yeah.
The trick is I will say the Julia community is very willing to engage criticism.
Yeah.
They jump on every discussion of the language, and so I suspect that they will want to have their say.
I think that we should really keep that separate. But I think it's an interesting question. How do you get out of a start? And so I think they should think about it.
I think they'll definitely.
I think they will probably argue and say it's not as good. You're right.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm actually James's colleague. I'm Katrina.
See what you can do.
Sorry.
Actually, I'm not so bad. Yeah. You're just standing. Well, I mean, there are. Standards, contract management, accounting guidance, promoting diversity and inclusion, project management, right? There's a lot of benefits. So that was all about NumFOCUS, right? Hopefully that level sets a little bit. Let's talk about how PyData fits into this. So the PyData conference series exists as the main educational outreach of NumFOCUS in support of its mission to support open source scientific computing. So despite the Pi in the name, the modern PyData event is intended to provide a welcoming, language-agnostic user community for all NumFOCUS projects. And unlike a larger trade show style software conference, right? You may be familiar with some of the bigger names. PyData is powerful because it's horizontal by design, right? You've probably already noticed like in the vibes here, but what I mean by horizontal is that there isn't a huge hierarchical gap between presenter and attendee. Many of the attendees are open source users themselves, or they're volunteers, they're contributors, right? Maybe they're future contributors to open source, right? So like our attendees come from the community and the community presents back, whether this is in academia or industry. So speakers are drawn largely from the same group with similar roles and job titles. And we encourage attendees to further blur this line through events like the Birds of a Feather Room, where anyone can host a session on the topic of their choosing, much like, kind of like an unconference, or during lightning talks, which on the end of day 2, anyone can sign up to give a 5-minute talk on the topic of their choice. And by the way, sorry, I kind of lost my note there. So by the way, sign up for both of these things is on the 5th floor at the NumFOCUS booth. But PyData is also special because it's one of the largest data conferences that isn't run by a company right now, right? It's by the community and for the community. And, I did have some little things there, huh? Good to know. Okay, perfect. So PyData NYC in particular, let's talk about this. So PyData NYC. PyData NYC in particular, along with London and some of the other larger events, they double as fundraising events. So both your conference ticket and our conference sponsors provide critical funding that make NumFOCUS's educational mission possible. So all the things we talked about before that cost money, this is part of the solution, right? This is part of the sustainability aspect. So, for example, every conference sponsorship here at PyData NYC supports one or more diversity scholars, which provides a free 3-day pass to attend this conference to someone who would not otherwise be able to attend. And actually this year, through the generosity of our sponsors, the PyData NYC Conference Organizing Committee was able to award an amazing 39 scholarships. And that was 100% of what was requested from the application form. We only had 39 applicants this year. Even though it was pretty widely advertised, right, through existing channels like the PyData Twitter, the mailing list, through the professional and diversity-focused networks identified, through the Conference Organizing Committee that people are a part of. So let me say it again. Through the generosity of our sponsors, this year we were able to meet 100% need, and that's amazing, right? It's huge, and the work that we put in as organizers and volunteers has a direct and tangible impact on the health of our community, right? It also means that we're in a really good position to continue to grow. We should be growing our pool of possible applicants. We should be building relationships with colleges, boot camps, diversity-focused meetups, professional networks, right? Like, we can do a lot more to keep growing because we're in such a strong position. But the PyData community is not just NYC-based or US-based. It is, of course, global, right? I know, I also fall into this trap as being a New Yorker of sorts, that we are not the center of the world, but our community is global. And so the PyData community is truly global because scientific computing doesn't have geographic boundaries, right? So when COVID-19 forced the cancellation of all in-person events in 2020, we wanted to do something virtual in its place that was truly global. Diego Torres, who's actually in the room, and Jane Adams, who were lead organizers here in 2019. He didn't know that I was going to call him out. They were lead organizers here in 2019, and they had already started planning PyData NYC 2020, right? And then that all got canceled, and they had to pivot very rapidly. And let me see here. And so along with the NumFOCUS Board of Directors, James Powell, along with the chair of PyData New Delhi, Sanket Verma, and the chair of PyData Amsterdam, Matthias Brons, they really took the lead in reimagining what was even possible for this community in terms of an online event. And the all-virtual PyData, a truly global PyData, is what came out of this, right? So there were talks all through the night, keynotes and social events happening during prime time, during all major global time zones. It was a massive, audacious undertaking with 55 organizers from PyDatas all across the globe coming together to prove this model could and would work. And we're actually in the third year now, right? Like this has been so successful that it's continued. These stats that I'm showing here are from the NumFOCUS Impact Report for 2021. It gives you a sense of the scale for the event, right? 215 talks or presentations and over 2,100 attendees. So PyData this year is actually still in the future, so you can attend this year. It will be held on December 1st through 3rd of 2022, so it's less than a month away. It runs for approximately like 18 to 20 hours per day. I don't think the official schedule is online yet, but it runs for a good portion of the day. And like in 2021, there was live programming from 6:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. UTC. So it covers all major world time zones. The tickets are pay what you can, right? And there's a suggested ticket price based on your home region. And personally, I don't know, I feel fondness for PyData Global because I remember waking up at 4:30 a.m. one time, local time, to co-host a pub quiz in a virtual platform called Gather, if you're familiar with that. So that was in 2020. And it's just kind of exhilarating to be up at an unusual time like that, sitting in your apartment alone and trying not to wake up everyone else and interacting with folks halfway around the world. So just to call out that tickets and sponsorships are still available. Oh, uh-oh. Uh-oh. 1 second. I hit the wrong thing and this is all gone. Not all gone. It's fine. Okay, we're back. But wait, there's more. PyData is more than a conference series. PyData also has meetups, and meetups have also experimented now. They've had to been forced to experiment with more virtual and hybrid offerings, even as many have started meeting in person again. So I think this is a net benefit that we've had to pivot, but but it's cool nonetheless. So just to give a sense of scale, in 2021, there were 190 PyData meetup groups in 66 countries and having over 180,000 members. So that's a lot of stickers, right? You got to draw it back to that. So these groups are active on every continent except Antarctica. And in 2021, these groups held over 450 events with nearly 15,000 RSVPs. So the PyData community is far larger than the conference series itself. These meetups are the grassroots effort. And they're almost entirely volunteer-led communities dedicated to making open source science and data science more accessible and inclusive. So even in cities where there isn't a large PyData conference, there may be a vibrant PyData meetup community. Okay, so what does it mean to start getting involved in building community in tech? For me, it means that 6 years ago, I started going to local meetups here in New York. Tech as an industry benefits from a strong tradition of amateur enthusiasts and hobby groups, so either sharing and hacking away on hardware or low-level software like operating systems, or more recently to show off cool apps and walk through code and design decisions that went into building them. No matter how long you've been working in the tech industry, there's always something new to learn, some new cool toy to play with, and I think that helps make the industry a lot more welcoming to beginners and folks with alternative backgrounds. Expertise in tech obviously still exists, but even experts can find a way to channel their beginner's mind by trying out whatever's the new hotness. Local meetups might get together in person or virtually for talk nights, where someone from the community talks about a subject of interest, or 5-minute lightning talks. There's a lot of different formats, right? There's book clubs where a technical book is discussed, or hack nights where you either bring a project of your own, or you work on it by yourself, or you pair program on it. You can do something like the sprints that we held yesterday, right? And a lot of times you can still hear me like using the verbal tick of nights, right? These things don't even just have to happen at night anymore. A lot more virtual events are happening during the day because they're remote, they don't have to happen after work hours. Lunchtime sessions seem particularly popular. So if you're completely new to the idea of a tech community, I suggest that you start by engaging with your local PyData meetup, get on their mailing list. Maybe they have a Slack channel or a Discord server. There is a Discord for PyData generally. You can see what upcoming events you can attend. Everyone's participation matters, and speaking as someone whose career has tracked with my involvement in the tech community, I think you'll find that having a professional network like this is really valuable. But let's pivot, right? That's a lot of background information about kind of community and organizing and why things are so expensive, but let's pivot. Why do companies sponsor NumFOCUS? No, I know. That's intentional. Thank you. Why do companies sponsor NumFOCUS? From what I've seen, there's really mainly two reasons. I would say that one is kind of mission alignment and risk mitigation from the ecosystem. And the second one is really about hiring, marketing, and branding. So the two are not mutually exclusive. And one of my goals as the chair of the NumFOCUS Champions Circle is to better understand how we can transform one-time sponsorships into more lasting partnerships. Let's get started with talking about these two things separately. So let's start with limited event-based one-time sponsorships. Because this can be an entry point for onboarding a strategic partner, but it's also an important unrestricted revenue stream, meaning that events generate funds that go to the area of most need and they're not earmarked for any particular project. So many times, companies seek out limited one-time sponsorships, such as a conference, in order to meet software engineers and data scientists or other kinds of scientists. So perhaps they want to do this to share open roles and meet their hiring goals. Perhaps this is to develop brand recognition among software engineers and data scientists. Maybe they have tools that they want to sell, services that they'd like these people to use. And in a third case, a person already acts as a bridge between the company and NumFOCUS, right? Such as the case where a company wants to directly sponsor events that their employees are engaged in helping to organize. So there's a huge amount of flexibility in how we structure sponsorships for events. And in many ways, the only limit is our own creativity, right? So some of the more typical sponsorships include PyData conference booths, branded social events, sponsored talks. It could be a logo on the PyData Global website, a virtual booth. It could be physical goods like lanyards and charging stations. It could be digital assets such as sponsor interview videos, like the ones that we produced and tweeted out during PyData Global in 2020. Thank you screens that are ahead of the professionally edited recorded conference talks. So one year, actually the very first year that I was involved in PyData New York, the startup I worked for then sponsored a plenary lunch panel. And they did it, largely as a show of support for me as an employee, right? But they also wanted to generate brand awareness for the AI software that the company made. So these sponsorships can be highly, highly visible, and they generate approximately 1/3 of NumFOCUS's annual unrestricted revenue. So they're an important revenue source. And in addition to the PyData conference series, NumFOCUS sponsored projects NumFOCUS sponsored projects also host specialized events. So there's PyData events, but there's also like JuliaCon, PackagingCon, JupyterCon, right? DeskCon. It's a desk distributed computing summit. So there's a number of different events. SciPy is now under that fold, right? Where it's now come under, it's going to be a NumFOCUS event going forward. Okay, so in the binary classification that I proposed, here's the other half of that. So the first one was limited one-time sponsorships, and I'm going to talk to you about like kind of a sponsor partner. This longer-term sponsor partner has a different motivation from a one-time or an events-driven sponsor. They're not simply like a one-time sponsor, but bigger, right? But again, sponsoring multiple events. But this could be a common misconception because generally long-term sponsors are thanked and promoted through visible event sponsorship, right? So oftentimes they get thanked at multiple events and it looks like they're just sponsoring the event, but truly they have a long-term strategic partnership with NumFOCUS. So instead, these sponsor partners, or rather strategic partners, generally at a minimum, align with NumFOCUS's mission to promote open practices in research, data, scientific computing. Many long-term sponsors have also expressed that there's a strategic business interest for them, that they have built their tech stacks on the assumption of a healthy and functioning ecosystem of open source scientific computing tools. They give back to open source not only because it's like quote unquote what's right, but as a matter of good business sense. So they may create in-house open source tools themselves. They may employ open source maintainers on their staff. Some companies pay developers to work part-time or full-time on NumFOCUS projects. And in this literal physical space, in particular, we talked about Microsoft sponsorship, right? We've been fortunate to have continued support from Microsoft to host PyData NYC because you may not be aware that although PyData NYC has been around since 2012, in the early days, it didn't have a regular venue, which resulted in 2016, the conference being canceled entirely for lack of a venue. And it's only since Microsoft has stepped in as a strategic partner that we've had a guaranteed space that this event has been able to continue. So, excuse me. I'd also like to highlight there are partnerships that are not strictly like monetary. They're not necessarily sponsorship based. One of the initiatives of the Champions Circle committee that we've been working on is to help map the many ways in which NumFOCUS sponsored projects are used in the wild. Okay. So, in some ways, determining where NumFOCUS projects are used in the wild is interesting because in some ways, this is a fool's errand, right? If you ask any data scientist on the street, hey, do you use pandas? Do you use scikit-learn, NumPy, right? Like if they work in Python, most people would be, most people are gonna say yes, right? Like it'd be hard to find someone that says no to this. Everyone uses these tools. So they're pervasive, right? And if you ask what they use them for, it's equally challenging, right? Like their answer might be like, I don't know, data exploration, like maybe some models in production, like literally everything, right? These tools are foundational, right? So determining like a use case sometimes can be a little bit tricky just by asking people what they use the tools for. Nonetheless, when we can distill down the right kind of nugget of information, this kind of general knowledge provided from the tech community back to NumFOCUS is incredibly valuable in understanding what messaging can resonate with companies and the types of problems they solve. So the folks who run NumFOCUS are experts in areas such as nonprofit leadership, events, marketing, governance. They're not necessarily techies themselves. That's changing a little. But they do have us, right? They have their wider community to be the bridge between project fiscal sponsorship and how the projects are going to be used by science, research, and industry. So an example of the kind of information that would be useful at the level of something like, I work in ad tech, and we depend on counterfactuals to understand and apply findings from our A/B tests, and we use Bayesian methods. So PyMC is critical to our work, right? That kind of like format of snippet of knowledge, or you could call it a mini use case, would be incredibly valuable. And if we had hundreds of these mini use cases that we could feed back to NumFOCUS, I think we'd be in a better position to start having the kinds of strategic conversations that we need to have with companies that support this ecosystem or that could support this ecosystem. So if this stirs something in you, go ahead and jot down a note right now so you don't forget. Oh my gosh. All right, good to know. 5 minutes. But I'd love to connect with you after the talk. So,
Do you have like a Google form or something to fill that out?
no, I don't, but let's chat about it. I love that. Okay, we're gonna skip that one. Okay, we talked a little bit about use cases. Okay, so, but it's also almost as if, you can work the problem backwards as well, right? Like, is there anywhere that you've seen some amazing scientific or technological breakthrough that we can collectively ask, what role did NumFOCUS projects play here? Right? I can't actually take credit for this idea. Juan Luis Cano Rodriguez and I were chatting about this yesterday, and I thought it was brilliant that he said, let's turn it on its head, right? As technical peers, we can still have these conversations, right? Reach out and say, like, okay, the helicopter that landed on Mars, like NumFOCUS was on board, right? Like NumFOCUS projects were on board. Let's reach out to those teams and find out how they use these things, right? And have these kinds of conversations.
Wasn't it in the first image of a black hole too?
It was, and that is on the website. So the time to do this is now, right? There's lingering economic uncertainty, and there's kind of a slow ramp up to hosting in-person events, so strong partnerships are more important than ever. Okay, let's pivot again real fast, because I know we're almost out of time. So you might be saying to yourself, this all sounds cool, I work at a company, how do I get my company involved in open source? All right, so first of all, there's a sponsor prospectus you can review on the website. But the best way to get involved to get your company involved is to get involved yourself. So show up, right? Like, we need your voice. We need you to be part of this, right? Lend your voice to and ideas to the cool things we're building, both in community and code. But like, just even more tangibly, right? You can contribute to talks, make examples, be visible in the community, read, speak. Read as meaning like the PyData newsletter, right? Like, get involved in the communications channel, be visible. You can also volunteer for the Champions Circle, right? Like, we have 3 working committees, so I think individual and corporate giving strategies should be fairly clear from the kinds of things that we talked about here. But also there's a technology committee where we're trying to help the development strategy become more data-driven. Our committee members are there. There are 1-year terms, and the year is coming up, so please feel free to express your interest. And here's kind of like a theory of employee-driven sponsorship, right? So maybe you are here, right, in building your awareness today, and that means that you can move, horizontally. Get involved, your time, your talent, your treasure, right? Open that pocketbook, that's okay, right? But more importantly, like, become part of the community. Your time and talent are really, really valuable. Organizing is the next step beyond that, right? Provide a platform for others to get involved. Now, your company's journey is important to understand too, right? What is their pain point? Maybe you can pivot them into a limited sponsorship, right? Is there a need internally for hiring, marketing, brand awareness? Is there a strategic partnership there that's possible? Let's pivot again, right? Just quickly, because I know we have I know we have plenty of time, so it'll be fine. You could say like, okay, so like I think this is great. I thought that it's a little basic because I'm already like super involved, but how do I really like have this conversation with my manager? Like how do I even get that started, right? I want to be seen as someone that builds bridges to outside networks, and I want to be seen as someone who is able to make those connections and solve the pain points of my company because I'm looking for that promotion. I want something in my packet, right? So maybe you want to talk to your manager. You can outline your involvement in NumFOCUS, right? This is where it's like really starting with yourself and how you want to build the community that you want to see. I think it's really important in focusing that towards, in centering that discussion with your manager. And then connect it to your company's pain points, right? Is there a need for hiring? Is there a need to sell? But also your risk exposure, right? Do you depend on the tools that exist in this ecosystem? Does it make sense to look into starting to support NumFOCUS tools sustainability? But actually how? Okay, right away, here's the key asks. PyData sponsorships are still available for global. You gotta let us know by November 30th. Let Jim know right here. End of year giving is important. That's actively being worked on. And we're looking to build up the speaking pipeline, the sponsor pipeline, and the calendar of events for NYC, PyData NYC's meetup. So these are immediate asks that you can put in front of someone right away. And that's it. I hope this was the talk. So I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Lauren Oldja. And you can find me on any of the social media that's there, especially Mastodon, as of this week. So, thank you very much.
The slide that had the email for the committee.
Yeah, sure. There you go.
So we have a few minutes for a question.
Oh, wow. Okay,
if you're
perfect.
available.
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is Allison. I organized the PyData PDX meetup in Portland. One of the things that my members have been asking for, a lot of time they're early career or transitioning from another career late, what is it that they need to get hired? And what I've been trying to recommend is start contributing to open source libraries. What I'm hoping to find is some communities who are particularly welcoming to new and maybe early contributors might give them a little bit of shepherding. I had a hard time finding that. There's been a gap between they want a lot more expertise. They want to get more out of the contributors more than they want to give to the contributors. And
Yeah, for sure. Because it takes investment, for sure, right?
It returns, though.
It definitely returns. Have you had a chance to speak with the woman on your right? So Melissa's one of our keynotes, and actually Katrina as well, right? Like if you want to speak to some projects that are particularly beginner friendly, but Melissa is one of our keynotes in the blue hair, and representing NumPy as well as a consortium of other SciPy related projects that are I would say they're particularly friendly to beginners. And in large part through the generosity of a large grant from Chan Zuckerberg, right? That these kinds of initiatives take resources to put behind them, right? So discovering that need of okay, if we can invest in this, we'll get the gains back, but we need that initial investment. That's where sponsorship comes into play. Katrina.
I was just going to add to this that our fiscally sponsored projects, we actually go through a vetting process for each one of the projects where the board members actually go in and look for things exactly like this. A lot of our fiscally sponsored projects have getting started guides in there, and they tag issues that are good for beginners. And so I would definitely take a look at that as well. We definitely give people kudos for that or suggest people do that as well so that there is a way for you to get involved. But like you said, what I always tell people is documentation is the fastest way to get everybody to love you, right? So we must write documentation. And in particular, I'm just going to pick on pandas because I always do. If anyone's looked at pandas docs, you know what I'm talking about. And it's a really good way to get started. Yeah.
Is there somebody in this community that would like? Because my people, okay, because my people always have a little bit of imposter syndrome. They're like, how could I possibly help? And I just want somebody to be like, yes, you will help.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic, and Jeffrey Beck is actually here.
Okay, if you can help.
I don't want to hijack the conversation, but yeah, we are doing this for the 4 projects, so NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, and Pandas. So for Pandas, we have Noah come here. She is working as a contributor experience lead. And I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, and but that's exactly what we're doing, kind of being hosts for the new contributors and being points of contact so that, yeah, she's not here in person, but we'll definitely, we can definitely chat later and talk about this. Yeah.
Amazing. Do we have time for more questions?
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. You take 30 seconds, I'll take 30 seconds.
Yeah, I was curious. So I guess, coming from more of the outside here, it feels like I think of like NumPy, Pandas, stuff is all being very much government funded, and it's anyway the can't afford to do it. So my image of these things is having lots of government support. So I'm curious, to what extent is there? See, there's that. So it's great, good. No. So I'm sort of curious to like, how should I understand the organization of NumPy, or PyData and kind of NumFOCUS as a whole? Because the impression is that like, well, I toss $5 a month at it. I don't assume that this is like a useful contribution side. And so I guess like, to what extent is the government fund? Like, are the projects?
I don't think there's any government funding, right? I mean, or minimal, maybe on some projects.
Yeah, NASA is funding.
NASA.
But that's this year, and you just are starting to spend money on it.
DARPA spent money at it 2 different points. That's why I was not.
Nothing consistent. There's been a couple of one-off projects. There was some contract work, 15 years ago, but for the most part, it's all been, most of the PyData stack is just rogue people doing things.
But I do want to add to that as well. In our annual report, that would fall under, like, corporate sponsorships fall under restricted funds that go directly to the projects. That is actually a line item in our budget. And then for the other ones, you can see what's going to small development grants, what's going to administration, what's going to all of these different things. So when you do give money to NumFOCUS, it definitely, goes for those legal fees, for governments, for, paying staff members, for PyData, and, all these things like that. So definitely does help fund that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.